what's going on, guys? My name is Pranay Manda, and I'm an M1 at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, and I want to talk to you guys about how you can make yourself a competitive applicant for the medical school application process. First of all, I want to talk about why I'm making this video. When I first came to college, I had no idea what to do. Nobody in my community had ever gone to medical school in America, so I had no idea what I was doing and what I could do to be a successful applicant. All I knew was that I wanted to go into medicine, and there was nothing else I wanted to do. I was really lost when I sought advice from people in the grades above me or the internet, because I was oftentimes met with very oversimplified responses or even just like straight up toxic responses. People telling me that it's almost impossible to get into medical school and you have to be at the top of your class in order to do it. With that in mind, having gone through the process and through college, I've come to realize that you don't need to be a perfect applicant or have perfect scores or perfect GPA in order to be a successful medical school applicant. So with that in mind, let's get right in. So I'm going to talk about a few different aspects of the application and go in depth into each different part. I'm going to include the timestamps in the description of the video so that you can skip to whatever you feel is important. So the different aspects of the application that I think you all should focus on in order to make yourself competitive include having a good GPA, having a good MCAT, a little bit of research experience, a lot of clinical experience, and then finding something that you personally are passionate about outside of medicine in order to talk about in your application. So in each aspect, I'm going to talk about how you can improve or make up for areas that you might be lacking in when it comes to your application. So arguably one of the most important aspects of the application is your GPA and MCAT. There's no getting around the idea that your GPA and MCAT is going to have the biggest impact on your application, although it's not the only impact on your application. In general, if you have a lower GPA, you're going to want to make up for it with a higher MCAT. Although I should make clear that oftentimes a high GPA cannot make up for a lower MCAT. You may not have the highest GPA or the highest MCAT, but I want to make clear that it's not the only aspect of your application that matters. And oftentimes, if you are outstanding in other aspects, you can make up for it. I know people who have a 503 MCAT and are in MD medical school, and I also know people with a 520 MCAT who have been rejected from every medical school they've applied to. It's very wishy-washy when it comes to what medical schools want, and it goes based on application to application. With that in mind, it's hard to give a baseline GPA or MCAT that would make you competitive. If you have above a 3.6 GPA and a 510 MCAT together, then you probably don't need to be worrying too much about this section. You should focus more on the other aspects of your application. Let's say you do have something like a 3.3 GPA, for example. What does that mean for your application? In that case, it's not too low, but it's not too high either. You should ask yourself two questions. For one, have I gotten less than a C in any of my prerequisite classes? And two, if I have I retaken the class and gotten a better grade? If you answered yes to either the first or second question, then you're probably in okay shape to go ahead and apply. You just need to be able to explain in your primaries or secondaries why you might have a specific discrepancy in your grades. The next thing I'm going to say and talk about is probably going to be pretty controversial. I want to speak about research. I want to make clear right now, you do not need to have research in order to be a competitive applicant for medical school. I know a lot of you are probably happy to hear this, and I want to repeat again, you do not need research. Now, with that in mind, am I saying that you shouldn't do research? Not at all. Because if you do have research and good research, it's probably going to make a significant difference in your application. But with that in mind, it's not going to have a negative impact to not have research. Now, if you're trying to go to a top 20 school that is very research focused, yeah, you're probably going to want some research there. In fact, some pretty high quality research. But personally for me, I had only one summer of research and I stopped it after that. Despite the fact I had much less research than most pre-meds, I got interviewed at more than 1/3 of the schools that I applied to. Now, if you're passionate about research and you actually enjoy it, you should definitely do it. But for me, I personally didn't like it, so I didn't want to force myself to do something I didn't like. And if you're in the same boat as me, you're probably better off investing the hours that you would be putting into research into getting more clinical experience. The next thing I'm going to talk about is probably one of the most underrated aspects of a medical school application, and that is clinical experience. I know people who have had a 4.0 GPA and a 520 MCAT who have gotten rejected from every medical school they applied to. And all the people who I know that this happened to, it was just because that they didn't have any clinical experience. Just think about it. What is a medical school gonna think when you're ready to put down the next 15 years of your life towards a career that you have no idea what it's like? If you've spent almost no time in the clinic, how do you know that you wanna spend the next 15 years devoting your life to an education in in order to be in that field. Medical schools want to see that you've made an effort to understand what the career is like, that you've gotten the experience and know for a fact that you want to do it. Now you might be wondering, oh my goodness, I'm about to go into the cycle and I don't feel like I have that much clinical experience. Well, I'm happy to report to you that I was actually in a similar situation when I was applying to medical school. I felt like I didn't have enough clinical experience after submitting my primaries, so I started doing some work in a clinical lab. And this is after I submitted my primary. Because I started working in this clinical lab, I was able to speak a little bit about my experience in my secondary applications. And then this oftentimes came up in my interviews and I was able to talk about my personal clinical experiences there. The next thing I want to talk about is finding something that you are passionate about outside of medicine. Medical schools really like to see you being passionate about something, especially something that's not necessarily medically related. For me personally, cooking was a big passion of mine, and I spoke a lot about it in my primary and secondary applications. My passion for cooking came up in almost every single interview that I did, and in fact, one of my interviews, the entire hour was spent just talking about cooking. Needless to say, medical schools really like to see you being passionate about something. It really gives them a sense of your personality. Because at the end of the day, your stats and your resume can speak to how well you will perform in medical school, but your passions really speak about your personality and how you might be a good physician with a good bedside manner. Medical schools really like to see who you are as a person. At the end of the day, these medical schools are receiving thousands of applications from people who have stats and extracurriculars that are 98% similar to yours. You really want to find a way to make yourself stand out from other people, and the easiest way to do that is to just talk about something that you are genuinely passionate about. At the end of the day, your GPA and MCAT are definitely very important, but the other aspects of your application can really take you far in terms of how successful you are in the medical school application. Now you may be thinking these aspects of the application I just mentioned to you may seem a little oversimplified, but I promise they're not. If you really focus on these aspects of your application, I guarantee that you will have a very successful time in the application cycle. You don't need to have a perfect MCAT or a perfect GPA in order to get into medical school, but you do need to make yourself stand out from other people. People tend to overemphasize the importance of research in the medical school application, and devoting time to clinical experience will take you much farther than devoting time to research. If you have any other questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them. I'll probably follow up with another video about what I think made me a very competitive applicant. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe.